Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this professional learning opportunity. Pueri Cantores presents We Sing webinar series part 1, Why We Sing. I am Bailey Cornelius, the digital project coordinator at NCEA, and I will be facilitating this webinar today. A few housekeeping notes as people are joining. We are recording this session today. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to use the chat window. We will be monitoring any questions and try to answer them all in the allotted time. At the end of the session, I will share a link to the online survey in the chat and instructions on how to receive a certificate of completion for the webinar. Today's presenters are Carrie Elko and Dr. Rudy Marcozzi. Carrie teaches pre-K through 8th grade music at St. Mary of the Woods School in Chicago and serves as an accompanist at St. Catherine Laboure in Glenview, Illinois. Carrie grew up on a commercial dairy goat farm in Pardeeville, Wisconsin, and attended Northwestern University, obtaining a degree in music education and flute performance. In 2021, she earned a master's in education with a focus on trauma and resilience in education from Concordia University. Carrie has been teaching since 2010 and has spent a majority of her time in Catholic schools and parishes. Recognizing that today's students require new and different approaches and means of engagement, Carrie strives to use current best practices, cognitive science, and recent research to create a toolkit that enables her to engage and motivate all students. Dr. Rudy Marcozzi is an award-winning educator, the Dean and Professor Emeritus at Roosevelt University's Chicago College of Performing Arts. He is also an active professional church musician with an extensive parish and university experience at local, regional, and diocesan levels. He is a member of the National Association of Pastoral Musicians, the Hymn Society in the United States and Canada, the North American Academy of Liturgy, and a board member of the American Federation of Pueri Cantores. He was a regular reviews contributor to Pastoral Music and editor and contributing author for Preparing Your Catholic Wedding by the Paulus Press. He currently serves as the coordinator of music ministry at the Shield Catholic Center at Northwestern University. Before I turn it over to our presenters, let us begin in prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Father, thank you for all those men and women who have given their talents to educating our young people. Through the challenges they encounter each day, lead them to an ever deeper appreciation of the sacred duty to which you have called them. May they be people of integrity so that they can be witnesses as well as teachers. We pray that the schools they lead will become places where our young people can experience your love in their lives. Thank you for our Catholic schools. Help us to pray without ceasing, to work without wavering, and to give without grudging in order to ensure the future of Catholic education for all our children. We make this prayer through your Son, Jesus Christ, our teacher and our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
I will now hand it over to Carrie and Dr. Marcozzi.
Thank you, Bailey. Good afternoon to everyone in attendance. We are delighted to be here. I just wanted to say just a few words about Pueri Cantores before we get started. Pueri is the official student choral organization of the Catholic Church with federations throughout the world. They advance the cause of choral singing and liturgical singing through choral festivals and choral masses, which are held regionally and nationally. Every 5 years, the festival travels to Rome for an audience and a liturgy with the Holy Father. We also are partners with the National Catholic Education Association in the form of these webinars, which we're about to participate in. I'm delighted to have Carrie here, who is not only a wonderful teacher, but trained in the latest and most cutting-edge cognitive science, and that's science that wasn't available to me when I underwent teacher training and even when I taught. So I'm delighted that all of the things that I sort of intuited have now become science, and she's going to lead us through all of that. And so without further ado, I'll let her get started. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you. To presentation mode. All right, so our workshop structure for our agenda today, we are going to be talking about why we teach music education, how music supports all learning, oxytocin, the hormone of belonging, neuroscience and music development, and how we actually learn looking at our brains using encoding, storage, retain, and recall. So why do we teach music education? Is it for our little love notes that we get throughout the year about how you've made my voice grow, a rainbow of music, and thanks for teaching me all this music, or the older students who write us letters about being in choirs after school, the chants that we learn in our music classes, and more importantly, that they got to carry the binder back from church on after Wednesday masses. But we can just take a moment to reflect on why do we teach music and what brought us into music education. If you want to put into the chat why you teach music, that would be great. Or Dr. Marcozzi, do you want to say why you teach music?
Sure. We were just talking about before we actually got started. We were talking with Bailey about the skills that we learn and the skills that we develop when we sing. So in my church choir, which is all volunteers, a lot of what they learn are things that transfer over to sports like breathing and rhythm, and especially we learn about the liturgy and the text that we're singing, and so music is actually sort of an avenue or a window into theology and a liturgical catechesis.
All right, so the chat is disabled, but you could put your answers in the Q&A.
Ah.
Yeah, learning curve. What do we want to happen when we work with kids in music class or choir? What are your goals? What are your outcomes? If you want to add that to the Q&A, I think you should be able to write it into there. Linda says that I love music and I want to be around it constantly. Dr. Marcozzi, do you want to answer that or move on to the next slide?
I think we could move on to the next slide.
Sure.
Thank you, Linda, for sharing that.
So goals for my music instruction is I want students to feel that they are a musician at their level, whether they are a kindergarten student or an 8th grader who is forced to be in my class or beyond. I want students to feel that they are musical for the rest of their life. And I want students to be able to find joy in listening, creating, or participating in music, because we want people to participate in the congregation of our churches, and we want our people to attend concerts for the musicians that put in all that work to be trained.
We have a comment from Jennifer. She wants her students to become musically literate. Thank you, Jennifer. That was a quest for all of us. I taught musicianship for most of those 20 years.
I see music education as many things, but mostly it is a creative outlet for our students. It's community driven and social can be put together there. You're always making music together in your groups. It's personal, and how you feel the music and react to the music. It instills discipline because there is no magic jelly bean that you can just take and be great at this art. It takes time and practice to make that happen. It is emotional and how we react to the music. And ultimately, we want music education to be lifelong and produce consumers of the arts. I always feel that we have to justify music as a subject. I have had principals assign ELA standards for me to teach in my music classroom. But on the flip side, how can you imagine asking a first grade teacher, a second grade teacher, oh, during your reading class today, please make sure you're working on those quarter notes and quarter rests, or whatever you're working on in your curriculum. We have to remember as music educators that we are educating the whole child and how that connects into all of the different subjects that we are ultimately teaching as a group.
There's also though we probably can't make those requests literally, there's the sort of easy potential for music to filter into other things like cheerleading chants, and we've known for centuries that when we rhythmicize something like a chant, that we increase the memorization of it. Memorization becomes a faster process. We've also, and then correlatively, when we sing something, that actually enhances the memory process even more. So there are things like the alphabet song that are used as a sort of mnemonic way of enhancing memory activities.
And Ruby brings up the point, we want all of our students to apply the skills they learn from music education to their daily lives. That is a really great point. Speaking from a cognitive development standpoint, through music, we introduce pattern recognition in sounds and in words, so students can identify same or different sound patterns or words in the lyrics, in that it comes through songs and chants. And cause and effect, it can also be taught through music education. If you use more energy, it's going to be forte or loud. If I play moving up the xylophone, the sounds are getting higher. If I go down, they are getting lower. The bigger the bar on the xylophone, the lower the note is, and making those connections. There's also symbolic representation. So for a lot of the younger kids, I use hand motions or ASL, American Sign Language, for songs to help them memorize them. And as they get a little older, I incorporate iconic rhythm notation. So students are using a little picture of a groundhog to represent an eighth note, and then moving that into the actual eighth note symbol.
Yeah, and to Jennifer's point about literacy, those are the kinds of things that are happening when we use solfege or Kodai hand symbols. Those are all instances of what Carrie just talked about.
And speaking of language and literacy development, music helps us to retain words and expressions. Rhythmic patterns mirror the cadence of language. It helps develop the fluency in speech. It hones our listening skills, so we have better auditory perception and can distinguish between sounds and words better than when it's spoken rather than sung. And it also brings about phonological awareness, so our ability to recognize and work with sounds in our language. Whether you're teaching Spanish or English or Italian, you do have better phonological awareness when you're using music. And through a literacy development lens, a vocabulary expansion, songs can introduce new vocabulary that students might not be able to read or write yet. And songs can teach about stories. So we learn the alphabet through a song. We can learn the states in alphabetical order through 50 Nifty and things like that.
Carrie, I'll leave you to field Raphael's comment about neuroplasticity.
I have some neuroscience stuff coming up later on, and if we could just hold that one until then, I think that would be.
Let me just jump in before we transition. Let me just jump in to remind everybody that in the early centuries of the church, the way that everything was taught to even ordained ministers, but especially to the laity, it was taught through the liturgy, and of course, one of the engines that drove the liturgy was sung chant, for all the reasons that Carrie just talked about.
And music also has a physicality to it. So Laboure movement analysis uses how the body moves. Is it high, medium, low? And body moving through time. Are you moving with effort? Is it heavy? Am I trying to move this really heavy refrigerator across the room? Am I walking in a bubble, making my body into a shape? And you use those in your preschool, pre-K, kindergarten, into your first grade years and it turns into folk dancing. I call them movement activities because kids can get a bad connotation with folk dancing, but with grades 2 through 8, I do incorporate it, and it's long way sets, circles, concentric circles. They sashay. It's the same motion that they use in basketball practices. And this is second grade. It is a long way set. They are it's called Kings and Queens. So they have the motions that they do together as a group, and then they get to show their own flair as they walk down, as everyone bows to them. I did cut this down because the next group of students took it to the next level, saying off with your head, like the Kings and Queens apparently did. And when I asked them why would you say that?
And back. Right hand turn. Left hand turn. Eyeball turn. Sashay. Royal walk.
So this shows that they are still, in fact, using those Laboure themes, using high, medium, low as they're bowing and they're sashaying, working on those coordinations. Music also supports social emotional learning. In my classroom, these are things that I do specifically. Archdiocese of Chicago now requires a SEL curriculum for every school, but this is how I support it in my classroom, is through empathy, impulse control, which is the bane of my existence. They come in and need to tell me that their gerbil died 5 years ago, or that they need to use the bathroom, or anything, but just giving them the tools that there's a time that you can tell me all those stories, but there's a right time to do that. And cooperative learning skills, and that was seen in the last video. They have to work together in order to make that happen, and how to work best with those around you, because you are not always going to like the people around you, but you're still going to need those skills. And it's through life. Your colleagues that you're going to work with, they might not be your favorite people, and you're going to have to be respectful and know how to work with them properly. And the superpower that we hold as music teachers, we see students for years and years. I will see kids from 3 years old through 13, 14. And that's a long time. Most classroom teachers, they get their 9 months and then whoop, on to the next. And they don't get to have those relationships and see them grow into the young adults that they will become. I came across this concept of greet with gladness. I stand at my door and I welcome the students in, tell them how happy I am to see them. And this greet from gladness came from a book by Michelle Obama. And when kids are getting ready in the morning or with their parents, oh, your shoes are untied and you spilled toothpaste down the front of your shirt, and they're hearing all of the things where they lack, rather than I am just genuinely happy that you are here and you are coming to my classroom and we're going to have a good time. And something that I just learned last year is the importance of listening and moving to slower tempo of music. And I will get more into that on a future slide. So music brings a sense of belonging. In music, we are singing together, we're performing together, we develop a connection, and we feel it together. It is about a connection. And as an adult, I have experienced groups that I love working with at Mass, and there are some that I don't really enjoy, and I don't participate in those groups. These are pictures of my Saturday night 4:00 Mass. We had a potluck after, and you can see all of their personalities being free to be who they are there. This is the 9 a.m. group that I have. Some of them are both sing at the 5 and the 9 because they just like being part of that group. And this is the Wednesday school choir that I also direct. Oxytocin is the hormone of belonging. It is released when you look lovingly at your pet or your child. I don't have one, but I have a really super cute cat whose name is Peso. The oxytocin hormone inhibits the fear response in the amygdala. So if you have seen Inside Out, the purple guy that drives, everything's going wrong and I don't, and just anxious and upset about everything, and the sky is always falling. And music teachers help release this oxytocin by building the trust over multiple years of teaching, listening and moving to slower tempo of music. That when you listen and move to slower music, it releases more oxytocin and you have that greater feeling that you belong in that classroom or in that ensemble. And singing and making music together, usually about 30 minutes of singing will release oxytocin, and listening to your favorite music. And this is really important when you're thinking about it from a classroom lens. Listen to the music that the kids like to listen to as well. You can have and tell them, like, these are great songs and we're all these learning purposes, but if you don't incorporate once in a while some of the stuff that they like, it will make a big difference in how much they enjoy and learn in your classroom. And we want to create a classroom or rehearsal culture where we have this sense of belonging, but also of learning. So we want our students to be critical thinkers, lifelong and independent learners. And by creating a space where they feel safe and brave enough to take risks and make mistakes is ideal. When I have any class or after school rehearsal, when they make a mistake, I tell them go for it. And if they make the mistake, I cheer and applaud that they went for it. And now I know what to fix. When they're singing quietly and not going for it, they could be making a mistake, but I'm not really sure because I'm not hearing it happen. And I make sure that we celebrate students and are supportive of one another and celebrate their victories and learn to be happy for others. If you put it into perspective of, do you want 25 others angry at you that you got to play the red drum first? So you shouldn't be disappointed or angry that you didn't get to play it first. My music classroom is also a place where it's okay to be frustrated, but you need to do it in an appropriate way and create a space where everyone feels like a stakeholder. I have binder carriers. It is a coveted job to take the binders that we used in that Wednesday morning mass and carry it the 100 yards back to the music classroom. A fight over it, or who's going to do it and whose turn is it. So now I have music fixers get to sit in my desk, and if there's a ripped music, they get to tape it. I bring a fake binder and then get someone else to do that. But the students feel like stakeholders and so excited to be part of your group. And treat choir or your rehearsal or your classroom as a family. You are not always going to like everyone, but you need to know how to be respectful. I came across this probably 10 years ago and have thought that is a really dumb idea. Who's going to call your choir a family? Ugh. And then as I changed my outlook on it, because I came from a perspective of Northwestern, you practice and you perform and you look for your mistakes in the errata in the music and work so diligently that you're missing the bigger picture of that sense of belonging. And you might not be the best, but you are there making that music. And when I send all my emails, hey, choir family, it really does change the dynamic of the group that you are working with. And
Again,
now we're going to, go ahead.
then we before we get to the next slide, just in those past ideas that we just heard, I would just note that they're especially critical for the students that we're teaching today. The high school kids are sometimes classified as Gen Z, but a generation of students that have grown up with the internet, and particularly the internet through cell phones almost exclusively. Psychologists and school administrators and health administrators report that these are the loneliest, most anxious, and most isolated students that we will ever teach to date. So all of these, music and singing in particular is a way that are antidotes to those ills that have sort of crept in as a result of the technological culture that students find themselves in.
Yes, and I find that I have all different groups of kids in my group. You can tell by the pictures that I had of the different groups that sing on the weekends with me, that they are all unique and bring something special to the table. All right, so neuroscience and music development. We have this thing called the vagus nerve, and it runs from in our brain and down through all of our major organs. And when you have strong vagal tone, you typically don't feel many butterflies in your stomach. If you have low vagal tone, you will feel the butterflies in your stomach and nervousness. And when you stimulate your vagus nerve through singing and humming. It also can be stimulated through bumblebee breathing, is a technique in yoga. And why is this important to have a strong vagal tone? It helps regulate your parasympathetic response. So your stress response, how do you respond when there are stressful situations in your life? So when you have a strong vagal tone, your heart rate slows, you have better gut health because most of your serotonin is produced in your gut. And it isn't just the feel good, it stabilizes and helps regulate your emotions. And it's easier to relax. And when you sing in groups, your respiration rate is also lower. And that also helps with having a strong vagal tone. There have only been 2 studies done about group singing and how it stimulates your vagal tone through your ears. But maybe more research will come in due time. I just know that for neuroscience, what we've learned in the last 20 years is more than we have learned in all of time when it comes to what we know about the brain and how we learn. And talking about neuroplasticity, let me read what the question said. Through music education as the practice of musical instrument, can we also reinforce neuroplasticity? So neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change and adapt due to our experiences. So if you are not singing and we're just going to use it from a singing standpoint. You might not have a strong vagal tone, and then you're going to potentially have more anxiety and you're going to have a higher heart rate. Your stomach is going to hurt because you don't have a great gut biome. You are not as easily able to regulate your emotions, and it all just adds up when this is not strengthened. Did I answer your question regarding neuroplasticity, or do you want to, Raphael? I just want to make sure that I touched on what you were asking. Ooh, oh, yes. Okay, great. So I want to touch on how we learn, and the brain and how it relates to what we do in our classroom. So we encode, we store, and we retain and recall. So encoding is I can take something new and put it into memory. It's always best if you can connect it to something else that you already know. So you know your major scale, and now we're teaching about minor scales and how they relate, similarities and differences. So a learner takes in this new information and it's put in your short-term memory, and it usually takes 15 to 30 seconds to let it sink in. And you can take this takes place visually, orally, or tactily, and the more modes, the better. And with music education, especially at a younger age or any age, you can do all three at once. It's always important to try and eliminate distractions so students are more attentive. And when there are fewer distractions, you will have a clear memory or less errors in the memory as it's being stored in your brain. So if you're thinking about learning a new song, you create the patterns in your mind by listening. Is this similar or different than something I already know? You break it down into smaller chunks. And then maybe a parachute or Mr. Stretchy is really great in my younger grades. They love it and feel excited when that's happening. So maybe add a prop to when you are learning a new song. And most importantly is in the environment, do they feel that they belong? If they don't feel that they belong, the encoding process doesn't really take place. And these are our neurons in our brains. So when you're learning something new, I showed 5th grade, we're working on ukuleles. This is their brain when we're first learning about the instrument. The neurons are just floating around. They're not really connected. There's nothing firing in between them. And as you get better, oh, I know how to tune it. I know what the names of the strings are. I know how to play Smoke on the Water on the A string. I can play a C7 chord for lime and the coconut. I can play a C and an F chord, and they are starting to see those connections. And as it gets better and more easy, as it gets easier to do, you are linking those neurons together and they are firing and connecting. And then we talked about a G7 chord. Now you're using 3 fingers. Oh, you're back over here and your neurons are all floating around like you've never played before. You can use this as like a jungle theme. You have your machete and you're trying to cut through your path in your brain to make all of those connect again, but now using 3 fingers. So that's how information is getting into our brain. And now we'll talk about how we store it. So storage, my brain changes when I learn something new and I can remember it. So you're taking this new information and putting it from short-term memory into your long-term memory. It needs lots of repetition and consolidation. So I'm going to reference Inside Out again, but if you've seen the movie, they are down with Bing Bong, the imaginary animal friend, and you see all the little marbles on the wall, and the guy with the vacuum cleaners are going, oh, you don't need those, and sucking them all up. And that is the consolidation, because you have all of this information, but what do we really need? And when you're storing it, you want it to be like a library. It's organized and we can find it when we need it, but also we can reorganize it as we learn more information. Uncommon sense teaching puts short-term memory into a view of an octopus. So it's easy to remember 4 things, but as you add 7 or 8, it all starts falling apart. And that is why phone numbers are only 7 digits plus the area code. If you want to think about this from a brain perspective, we have the prefrontal cortex, which helps with the short-term working memory. The hippocampus is where creation of short-term memory storage and long-term memory creation happens. And when students are using movement and happy or excited about learning something, the cerebellum is in place, and that helps process the information. And the amygdala creates sentimental and emotional associations with those memories. And Dr. Dan Siegel is one of my favorite authors on this subject and researchers, and he has a lot of research that he came with the hand brain. And if your students are not regulated or they're upset, they're coming in hot from recess, something happened, their pet died, they are not regulated, they are not encoding, and they are not storing anything. So it's called flipping their lid. So you have your hand and your fingers are all up, and because you are only living in your lower brain stem and you are only doing basic bodily functions, you're not reaching your prefrontal cortex, you're not making any great decisions because you are not regulated. So if you have a space in your classroom for students to re-regulate, that's really helpful for getting them to actually learn and make storage happen. And sleep is very important. So sleep before, so you are primed for learning, and after, so new information can be brought in and strengthened and stabilized, and that's where consolidation happens. So if you or your students are not getting good sleep, you are not going to be able to store your information and recall it in an appropriate manner. Now, retrieval, I can recall the things that I have learned when I need to do so. So we have available versus accessible information. Available is all the information that has ever entered your brain. So we can do a little exercise. Look around the room for about 30 seconds, because that's how long it takes to get into our short-term memory, our working memory, for anything that's brown. I'll give you 30 seconds to do that. So that was about 30 seconds. And now I'm going to ask you to please name 2 things that were red. You're like, why is she asking me to name something for red? She asked me for brown. But available is you look through your entire room, your surroundings, wherever you are, and you're looking for the brown. You did, in fact, see the things that were red, but you didn't have that accessible because of how you were thinking about it. And accessible is the ease with which we retrieve the information. It usually takes about 8 seconds to retrieve information. So when you ask your students questions, give them time to think about it before just calling on the first hand that is raised. 8 seconds is what it takes to retrieve. And our accessible memory is very small in comparison to how much information we take in. And when we have tip of the tongue, it's the information is accessible, but it's just temporarily unavailable. And as you're driving home, you'll remember what you needed to those few hours ago. And to help with the retrieval process, you can have a smell can bring a memory back, a song, a visual. If you have a visual cue for your student, it might help with the retrieval process, especially with young students. If you are doing a song, to have visual cues to help them with all those words, because they probably cannot read all of the words to the song as a preschooler. And you want to have students interact with what they already know, build upon it, making it meaningful to them. Does it relate to what is happening in their lives? Interact with it in different ways. Like, do you use a parachute to keep the beat? Do you walk a steady beat with your feet? Can you play it on an instrument? Things like that. And consider or manipulate it in other contexts. Can you take what we already know and transfer it onto something else? And we want to make learning stick. We want it active, engaging, emotionally connected. We want to interleave. So if you think about a basketball practice, you don't just stand for 30 minutes and shoot free throws. You're working on layups and drills and plays with your teammates. It isn't just one specific thing, and that's what we need to do with our lessons as well. Spacing, do you introduce it, do something else, come back to it, and so forth. Low stake quizzing, this is a quarter note, it gets one beat. Do an activity. Now, what was that thing? It looked like the letter D, but it was filled in, and quizzing students in a way that it's not a big risk if they answer it wrong, but it also is bringing it back to the forefront of their short-term memory. And clear and targeted feedback for if you are working on a new song, or in second grade, we're working on First Communion music that they are singing, and which words did they sing wrong? Did they sing it too loud? Whatever you're working on. But when you get good at giving the feedback, students will learn to give feedback to themselves without you even asking. And when you activate the brain in multiple ways, that is the best for long-term retention. I have a little video. I host a K-2 music club on Wednesdays after school for an hour, and we were working on the form of our piece. So these are pool noodles with a knot on the end, so it kind of looks like a horse. So they would ride the horse. The song is The Wild Horseman by Schumann, and they would ride the horse during the A section, and then they would freeze during the B section, but just making them excited and be able to move their bodies while they're listening.
We'll talk about that. Oh, I saw some moving. Caught it on camera.
So that's just one way. You could do that with a church song if you wanted to, talking about the form of a piece, but just doing something fun that they love doing and pairing it with a learning target. And then this was this little light of mine with preschoolers and adding a scarf movement piece to their learning. If you're talking from just a choir perspective, make choir the place to be. So every year my choir sings at the Chicago Wolves game. We participate in a choir festival at Loyola Academy. It's one of the schools that we feed into for Catholic high school. If this doesn't exist in your area, work with your high school director and create something. It started small and grew into multiple feeder schools, and they all come together, and then the students, the high school students work with the students to learn the pieces, and then there's a little informants at the end. We sang at the Quigley Pastoral Center downtown Chicago for the Vicar General. We caroled on all 4 levels of the Quigley Center and sang for all the employees, bringing some Christmas cheer. We also recorded 3 songs for a Catholic documentary series. It is called Holy Ground. It's based on the history of Chicago told from the perspective of the Catholic Church. And it just makes music real because they're seeing all these recording artists and they're on YouTube, and so are they, only they're 7 and 8 years old.
Then we'll go back and do the real one.
Oh, you know what? If that's how they're going to be sitting,
We are saved by the grace of the
finally, we want to make music, or we want music education to be lifelong. So this is what a decade of working together looks like. This is the oldest picture I could find. She started in 3rd grade with me and 5th grade. This is 6th grade, and this is at Choir Fest that we went to, and it turned into, she went to that high school, and she is a senior this year, and told about how she's going to major in music and how she was at this choir fest when she was the age of the kids that I brought. I attend their high school concerts, and November their mom texts me and say, can the girls sing at Christmas? And this is our 10th year of singing a Christmas Eve mass. And all that we do when they're little and moving through our music programs, we want this to be the ultimate goal of come back and sing for your parish, even though that they are away at college and people have really busy lives, and making that an important part of their Christmas tradition. So I have my top professional development reads. If you, as a music teacher, if you're looking for some classroom management strategies, these 3 books are great for that. They're different perspectives, so you can take the best of each one and put it into that. These are some brain science books on how we learn and best practices that way. The Uncommon Sense Teaching is really great if you teach junior high or high school students. They give more practical descriptions and things you can do right in your classroom today. But if you have an older set of students, I feel that it works best for that. Your Child Is Not Broken is told from the perspective of a parent with their child with autism and everything that they have to go through, and taking that into perspective as you're looking at your students. And Trauma Stewardship is a book that every teacher should have on their shelf to read. As teachers, we face a lot of trauma from our students. They bring in a lot of baggage, and depending on your demographic or your school, and we have to deal with that. And we also take it on as secondhand stress and secondary trauma, and how to have ways to care for ourselves so we can continue to care for others. Books that are on my upcoming read list are listed here: Culturally Responsive Teaching, more SEL with teaching, and more brain, because that is just a topic that interests me. You're probably thinking, how on earth do you have time to read these books? Teachers are busy. I am playing on the weekends for churches. But there's this quote that if you read 1 serious book, you know a lot about the topic. If you read 3 serious books, you're smarter than most on the topic. And if you read 10 serious books on one topic, you're nearly an expert, rather just those in the field. And there's this 75 hard is a mental toughness challenge. There's different aspects to it. There's 2 45-minute workouts. There's drink a gallon of water, stick to a diet, and then 10 pages of professional development. And I definitely cannot do 2 workouts, and I can't drink a gallon of water because I'm a teacher and we don't have any breaks for that. And sticking to a diet is really hard when there's a teacher's lounge and people put cookies in there. It's hard for me to say no, but I can read 10 pages of a professional development, and it doesn't seem like much, but 10 pages over a month is 300 pages, and it just compounds from there. If you're looking for a book to better yourself, these are some of my top choices. So Chop Wood, Carry Water talks about how to go from nothing into greatness in whatever it is, music or otherwise. And this quote in there that, oh, it's just Greek to me. Well, it means that you don't have the knowledge through experience to do something. You just kind of know about it. Good Morning, I Love You is about mindfulness and self-compassion. You might have this stellar lesson that you came up with and it bombs and the kids aren't into it, and it took 5 minutes instead of the 50 minutes you thought it would take. And just being reflective on how can you change it or do better, but give yourself some grace going through that. And the doorstep mile is how to live your life in a way that you are growing and you are living more adventurously. So are the choices that you're making allowing you to grow, or are you staying stagnant? And be like big decisions that you're making, are you like, yes, that is what I am going for? Or is it like, yeah, I can take it or leave it? And make sure that all of your choices that you are making eventually lead into that yes, enthusiastic yes. So thank you for your time today and listening to me go on and on. I appreciate that. Do we have any questions that we want to add to the chat, or not chat, into the question box about anything? Dr. Marcozzi, do you have anything to add?
No, I think we covered everything nicely. I thank everyone for being with us. And I'll insert a public service announcement here that this year the NCEA webinars have been cast into a series of 3. So Carrie led us through the why we sing. She'll be with us next month to talk about the what of singing, and Carly Fitzsimmons, a conductor in the Chicagoland area, who, by the way, just did the choral festival in Chicago for Pueri Cantores. She'll be with us in May to talk about the how of singing, a lot of vocal technique, and especially with younger singers. So
okay, there was a question in there. I said, could you please give an example of an activity to help students re-regulate in the classroom? Could you see me as I was talking about the brain and flipping your lid? I had all my things closed off, so I didn't know what I was showing. But essentially, so the Dr. Dan Siegel, you're flipping your lid, you're living in your lower brainstem, you can't function, you are dysregulated in whatever that may look like for your students. So I have a cool zone, Pete the Cat cool zone in my classroom, and I have activities. They can color, they can do puzzles, they can read silently. It's also beneficial to, if you have some kind of scent that they could smell, because it triggers a different part of your brain to help regulate yourself. That you could put 2 hands prints on the wall and you push really hard for 10 seconds, and that releases some of that dysregulation in their body. I have an envelope on my desk at all times, and then I'll write a teacher that's very far away from my classroom and have them go deliver this very important note, but it gives them a time to walk, be out of the situation, and come back. You could go have them get a drink of water. There's different tools that you can have, but you also have to have the person on the receiving end of this know, like, oh, they need a break. So maybe give them a hug, high five, something. I also have go touch the gym door and come back. And that time away and that space and quiet just gives them that time to re-regulate. I think that is a few. Was that enough? Did I answer the regulate? Was that enough about re-regulating in the classroom? There's a few ideas. And I'm in the chat, there is a form to fill out. That is for your hour. That was Bailey's.
Thank you so much, Carrie and Rudy. That was so informative. Thank you all for attending today's NCEA webinar. NCEA continuously strives to improve the quality of our services for our members based on feedback. We will use your input to inform future work and improve services. This survey should take about 5 minutes to complete. I've already dropped it into the chat. If you are interested in a certificate of attendance, please include your email address and name at the end of the survey. Since your certificate will be sent via automated email, please also check your spam if you do not see an email within a few minutes. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Again, thank you, Carrie and Rudy. It was phenomenal, and have a lovely rest of your afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.